So today I'm going to be ranking every Mike Tyson fight that went the distance from least to most entertaining, in my opinion of course. Iron Mike Tyson ended his 58 fight pro career with a record of 50 wins, 6 losses, no draws and 2 no contests. He was stopped in 5 of his 6 losses and disqualified in the other. Now Mike Tyson is of course well renowned for being a knockout artist, and 44 of his 50 wins were indeed officially by knockout, and one of the wins were officially by disqualification, that being his fight against Peter McNeely, in which McNeely's manager ran into the ring to stop McNeely from taking any more punishment, and this was in the very first round, so it's fair to say that Tyson was on his way to a KO in that fight as well. So aside from the 44 KOs and the 1 DQ, the other 5 of those 50 wins were of course decision victories for Tyson. So yes, spoiler alert before I get into my rankings, Mike Tyson is indeed undefeated in fights that went the distance. Again, most of his memorable victories are knockout wins, and he's not particularly known for being involved in back and forth wars that went the distance, or for outboxing his opponents in order to outpoint them on the cards over the distance. And of course his fights that did go the scheduled distance make up just 5 of his 58 fights, so it was a rarity of sorts. So what happened in those 5 fights that Tyson went the distance in, and were they a fun watch? Well, let's take a look now as I get into my rankings. Alright, so number 5, we start off with what is in my opinion the least entertaining of the Mike Tyson fights that went the distance. That being his unification fight with James Bonecrusher Smith on March 7th, 1987 in the Hilton Hotel. The 20-year-old Mike Tyson was 28-0 and he was the new WBC World Heavyweight Champion, coming off of his knockout victory over Trevor Berbick to gain that belt. He was on a 7-fight knockout streak going into his fight with Smith. Smith on the other hand was the new WBA Champion, coming off of a round 1 knockout victory over terrible Tim Witherspoon to win that belt, avenging a prior loss to Witherspoon in the process. Tyson stood at 5'11" compared to James Smith, who was 6'4", and Smith had an 11-inch reach advantage. So would this play into account in the fight? Now this unification fight was billed as Super Fight, and it was the first unification fight of the heavyweight unification series. So the winner was guaranteed a shot at the IBF title in order to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. A high stakes fight indeed. So would the action in the ring live up to the stakes? Well, we all know this is notoriously a bad fight due to a certain survival tactic from Smith. So I'm going to run down the fight now to show why it's the least entertaining on the list, but I'll try not to make this too long. And quickly before I start, the fight was scheduled for 12 rounds and Mike Tyson was a 7-1 favourite. Okay, so it's established from the off in round 1 that as Tyson tries to come forward with shots, Bonecrusher Smith will constantly and relentlessly clinch him, hooking the shorter arms of Tyson to avoid any attack from the young knockout artist. Tyson seemed frustrated from the very first round and actually gave Smith a jab a good bit after the round ended. To start round 2, Tyson got through with a good right hand that would open up a cut above the left eye of Smith. Not long after this, we'd see Smith's holding tactics turn up a notch when he held Tyson's hand down and refused to break upon referee Mills Lane's command, so Smith was deducted a point. The crowd would boo at this uneventful action and the employment of survival tactics so early in the fight from Smith. Mike Tyson again looked outright frustrated at the end of this round, sharing the sentiments of the crowd. Round 3, Smith is still constantly grabbing and holding, and Tyson is doing what he can to get leverage on shots in close as Smith went to hold. Same thing in round 4, Smith would swing the odd punch that got evaded by Tyson and he would follow up his missed punch with some holding. He seemed to be holding every other second here. The cut above Smith's eye does seem to be worsening here in the 4th, but that's no excuse for the holding of course, he was doing that before the cut. 5th round, what can I say, Smith still constantly clinching and trying to survive in there in a non-boxing approach. Tyson does manage to get through with some clean shots, but it's limited. In the 6th round, Smith tried to showboat and clown Tyson and got booed by the crowd for it, then got hit by Tyson for it. For the rest of the round afterwards, Smith literally walked away from Tyson. So halfway through, Tyson is clearly ahead in the fight, but the action just can't flow between the two. Going into round 7, the fight is still very boring. It was hard to even concentrate on. But Tyson falling to the canvas as a result of being off balance towards the end of the round woke the crowd up a bit. So again, it's another sort of non-boxing moment that gets the attention of the crowd. Round 8, same thing with Smith holding still. He was deducted a point for the second time in the fight for not letting go of a hold. In round 9, Tyson was looking deterred to even come forward, as he can't seem to do so without getting caught in a clinch. And being that Tyson is the pressure fighter, these instances of him not coming forward mean literally nothing happens in those moments. And the last 3 rounds of the fight, there's nothing else to say really, same thing. But Smith did try to explode with some shots in the last 10 seconds of the 12th and final round. So the fight went the full 12 round distance, a very underwhelming heavyweight world title fight that did not live up to expectations. A fight of such high stakes does not need to be so exciting punch for punch to have the audience intrigued, especially at heavyweight where any single punch can end the fight. A cowardly and actually illegal approach from Smith, and on Tyson's part, despite clinching being illegal in the rules of boxing and Tyson being the clear winner on the cards, well, he didn't make the adjustments to change the manner or the timing of how we got into range to land clean shots without being clinched, which seems very harsh to say, but I want to cover all bases here. It does take two to tango, but from a fan's perspective, being as critical as you can given how Tyson was built up, there might be an expectation that he could deal with anything, but he definitely didn't get the fight he wanted here. But again, the clear winner for sure. It was 119-107 to Tyson on two of the judges' scorecards and 120-106 on the other. So it's quite upsetting that Tyson's first unification fight was so boring. This might be the most boring fight in Tyson's career all round, not just of the ones that went the distance. And it could be one of the worst heavyweight world title fights ever. One of. Alright, next up we go back in time for number 4 on this list. This being Mike Tyson's scheduled 10-round fight against James "Quick" Tillis back on May 3rd, 1986 at the Civic Center in Glen Falls, New York. Just 10 months before the Bonecrusher Smith fight, but 9 fights before. Yeah, those were different times, man. Tyson was only a kid back in this fight, being 19 years old at the time, and he was 19-0 and on a 19-fight KO streak. So yes, this entry is his first ever pro fight that went the distance. Other than his 6-round TKO victory over Jesse Ferguson 2 fights prior, a Mike Tyson fight hadn't even seen the end of round 3. On the other hand, his opponent James Tillis was a 39-fight veteran with a record of 31-8. He was a former world title challenger and went the 15-round distance in the fight against the then WBA champion Mike Weaver, and Tillis had gone the 10-round distance with many top fighters in the past. But the 19-year-old Kid Dynamite was still tipped to get rid of Tillis inside the distance, of course despite this being his biggest step up in competition to that point. And just to note, before I get started, Tillis had a 9-inch reach advantage against Tyson. Tillis also happened to be in the best shape of his life at this point, as he finally discovered that a dairy allergy was the result of his fatigue in the past, and dairy was of course previously part of his diet, and was obviously now cut out of his diet as a result of this discovery. So the first couple rounds of the fight, Tyson was putting the pressure on as one would expect, but he didn't seem to be in too much of a rush to completely blitz him like he did his previous and less stellar opponents. So a bit of respect for the opponent here from Tyson. Tillis was bouncing around and moving on the back foot, catching Tyson with some shots here and there, and would do his fair share of clinching when Tyson came in close. There was some clinching from Tillis to start the third round, to where he had to be warned by referee Joe Cortez. Also in the third round, we saw Tyson land a big shot that had Tillis shaken, but Tillis fought fire with fire and engaged in a quick but high output and frenzied exchange which had the crowd roaring, and this is still a moment we always see in clips to this day. Tillis managed to tag Tyson with a decent uppercut shortly after the exchange and tagged him a couple more times in the remainder of the round, but one might say the more damaging and telling shots came from Tyson here. In the fourth round, it remained competitive between Tyson and Tillis, and we got another quite memorable moment in this one when we saw Tyson ducking so low to evade a combination from Tillis. Crazy stuff here. Tyson would actually knock Tillis down in the fourth round, punishing Tillis for completely leaping in with a left hook. It was a clean knockdown, but Tillis wasn't really hurt, as it was more so to do with him being caught off balance with that shot he left himself so open to. Round 5 we had Tyson exploding and burst with attacks, but he was not landing as often as he would in his prior fights before this one. There was still clinch from Tillis at this point, and Tillis got a couple nice uppercuts in that moment in this round, but this gave Tyson the incentive to return with bigger shots. So halfway through the fight it would appear that Tyson is winning as a result of the more effective punches and pressure, but the narrative here is that Tillis has given Tyson a way harder fight than he was used to at the time. So in the 6th and 7th rounds, we saw James "Quick" Tillis on his toes still, bouncing side to side and throwing straight shots at Tyson to offset his style of pressuring. Tyson couldn't land with the big counters off of evasions like he was used to. Tyson got the crowd's attention with an explosive attack at the end of the 7th round, but Tillis didn't seem too phased and responded with punches of his own. But Tyson's pressure was still the most telling factor of the fight overall, and he was landing. Round 8 it was the same with Tyson pressuring, but we saw Tillis' cagey movement sort of limiting Tyson's entries of attack. Round 9 James Tillis was still successful in his outside fighting approach to avoid being hurt by Tyson, and Tyson now seemed frustrated with the seeming inevitability of the losing of his KO streak. Despite being ahead in the fight, he had already gone over 3 rounds longer than he ever had, and the crowd seemed impatient. In the 10th and final round, Tyson seemed a bit more urgent to keep his KO streak than the few rounds prior, but Tillis was still clinching and surviving, and despite the crowd trying to urge Tyson to keep his KO streak, Tyson couldn't get the job done in terms of winning inside the distance. The exchange at the end of the last round continued past the bell to top off the frustrating fight that this became. Again, a competitive fight, very good performance from Tillis, and good from Tyson as well. Not the worst fight in the world, but definitely far from the best. and fairly underwhelming given the expectations. And the better moments came earlier in the fight, so it ended up sort of dragging on a bit. Again, I'm taking nothing away from the tactics employed by the respective athletes, but I'm talking purely from an entertainment standpoint here. It must have been interesting at the time to see how Tyson can deal with his toughest opponents at that point, but realistically Tillis had been stopped 3 times in the past, so it seemed like more of a win on his part to just survive Tyson, and an L for Tyson to lose his streak. And watching Tillis sort of survive Tyson isn't the greatest watch, but the W on Tyson's part, despite actually winning the fight, was proving that he had the cardio to go the distance, but it wasn't in the most enjoyable way. As for the scorecards, 2 judges scored it 6 rounds to 4, and the other judge scored it 8 rounds to 2, all for Tyson of course, and the crowd actually booed the 8-2 card, so they must have seen more rounds for Tillis in there. Alright, now for number 3 on the list, the third most entertaining Mike Tyson fight that went the distance, in my opinion, that being Mike Tyson vs Mitch Green. This fight was actually chronologically the fight after the last entry on this list, so yes, as soon as Tyson lost his KO streak, he went the distance for a second time in a row. Now it was a real toss up between what I thought was more entertaining out of the Tillis fight and the Green fight, but I'll give my 2 cents after I run this fight down. So this fight was another scheduled 10 rounder and actually took place a mere 17 days after the Tillis fight on May 20th, 1986 in Madison Square Garden. The 6'5", 29-year-old New York gangster Mitch Blood Green had a chance to derail the hype train of Kid Dynamite. Green had a record of 16-1 with 1 draw at the time, so how would the fight play out? So I can't lie, at the very start of the first round it looked like this could be nothing other than a wrestling match, as the first round started with Mitch Green using his 11-inch reach advantage to continuously underhook the shorter arms of Tyson. But in the second round we saw Tyson get frustrated and shove Green off, forcing a break himself, and shortly after he would knock Mitch Green's gum shield out of a good shot, which was a cool moment. If only he broke every clinch like that, right? But that's not a sustainable approach of course. The ref was fairly lenient with Green's holding, so Green would actually hold and hit, but he would actually throw punches with some intent while holding, rather than just trying to survive. And this made for some heated exchanges, as needless to say, Tyson was matching fire with fire and coming off better for the most part. But it looked like Tyson threw a couple cheeky elbows in there, so a dirty and scrappy round 2, but in a fun way. Remember, these fights are ranked on entertainment, not how clean they are. In round 3 we saw Tyson send Mitch Green's gum shield flying out of his mouth again, with a power jab this time, so cool moment again. It was still very clinch heavy in the third, but Tyson was throwing some heat between the clinching instances and even in the clinch. Round 4 weren't as good, more of the same clinch stuff, but not as many clean shots from Tyson in this round, and not really many shots thrown from Green at all. So in round 5, Green was going for some big swings, and we got that infamous head movement frenzy from Tyson, in which he absolutely clowned Mitch Green and had the crowd roaring.
Some of the people he fought. Look at here. Just laughing at him. And Green seems to me, Ray, to be doing all the wrong things.
Incredible moment that went down in history. Tyson was only 19 years old at this point, but we never saw him have a bubble like this in the ring for the remaining 19 years of his pro career. So this moment did age to become more precious, to be honest, but definitely still fun to see at the time given the crowd's reaction. Round 6 we saw more big shots from Mike Tyson, who was clearly ahead in the fight, and Green would continue to clinch, and at points it almost looked like Tyson became a bit lackadaisical and was rushing in, allowing himself to be clinched. Again, that topic causes a lot of stir because some people's stances that clinching is not boxing, so it shouldn't be tolerated at all, but some would opine that Tyson has some responsibility to adjust to it. I think there's validity to both, so have at it in the comments. But due to how much the clinching took over at times, the KO didn't look too likely. The 7th was a bit better than the 6th, with Mitch actually going for some shots, which left more openings for Tyson to land, but the crowd seemed to be growing a bit impatient. After round 7, Tyson looked to be up 7 rounds to 0, but also looked to possibly be going without a KO again. In the 8th round, we saw a big moment when Mitch Green started exploding with some hard shots, and Tyson was evading some of them trying to clown Mitch Green again, but Green landed well with some shots and kept throwing to actually win the exchange and wake up the crowd. But Tyson landed the bigger shots as the round went on, between Green's holding of course. And as for rounds 9 and 10, well, there's nothing new to comment on, not or get into the fight. No more significant moments and the crowd weren't into it. So after the fight went the 10 round distance, one judge had it 8-2 to Tyson, and the other 2 had it 9-1 to the young phenom. Tyson now had a record of 21-0 after defeating Green. So in terms of me deeming this fight more entertaining than the Tillis fight, well, a case can be made for the Tillis fight being more entertaining than the Green fight as it was more competitive, the action was arguably more consistent, and the duller moments in the Green fight were probably duller than the dull moments in the Tillis fight. So you can probably see where I'm going next. But also quickly just to note, I'm ranking these in order of the entertainment value of the fights themselves, and I don't want to bring context into account, but the respective contextual factors for each fight kind of balance each other out anyway. One was the end of his knockout streak, and the second one was his second fight in a row going the distance. And the crowd being impatient with Tyson not getting a KO shouldn't play into account too much for how entertaining the fight truly is. but ultimately it happened for the same reason in both fights. Both opponents employed survival tactics to go the distance, which did hurt the entertainment value a bit. So it's the same sort of thing really from these two fights which took place within the space of 2.5 weeks. But back to the point, I personally just found the Mitch Green fight easier on the eye, and I think the bigger moments in this fight was more enjoyable than the moments in the Tillis fight. Again, although Tillis boxed better against Tyson than Green did, when Green did throw shots it was with more spite and it created for more exciting moments, and we got to see Tyson have a bit of fun in there, which made it a more iconic fight. Now Tyson vs Green went on to be an iconic rivalry, but their rematch 2 years later wouldn't be in the ring of course, and it's fair to say that the then retired Mitch Green, who was high on PCP at the time, didn't go the distance with Tyson the second time out, so we won't run that one down in this video. Alright, next up we've got what I consider to be the second most entertaining Mike Tyson fight that went the distance. This being Mike Tyson vs Tony TNT Tucker. Now in terms of the timeline here, this fight took place 2 fights after the first fight on this list, that unification fight against Bonecrusher Smith. Now this fight with Tucker was also a unification fight, as Tyson was the WBC and WBA champion of course, and Tony Tucker had just knocked out one Buster Douglas to pick up the vacant IBF heavyweight title. So the winner of Tyson vs Tucker here was to be the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, belt wise at least. So this was of course the final of the heavyweight unification series. This fight was taking place on August 1st, 1987 at the Las Vegas Hilton, and Tyson was conceded 11 inches in reach to the 6'5" Tucker, so the same height and reach differential to the last fight on this list. The now 21-year-old Tyson was 30-0 and on a 1-fight KO streak, but with 8 knockouts in his last 9, and Tony Tucker was 34-0, so somebody's O had to go in this undisputed fight. By the way, this fight was scheduled for 12 rounds, but was originally scheduled for 15 rounds, as this was still in the IBF rules. Tony Tucker's round 10 stoppage over Buster Douglas for the IBF belt was actually scheduled for 15, but the day before this Tyson vs Tucker fight, the IBF met with the WBC and WBA, and it was settled that the fight would be scheduled for 12 rounds. One more thing before I get into the fight, Mike Tyson was an 11-1 favourite going into it. So the first round we of course saw Tyson come straight at Tucker, and he pushed off Tucker's early clinch attempt as he had enough of this by now, but Tucker still did continue to clinch a bit. Tyson kept bombing forward with big shots, and Tony Tucker actually landed a nice left uppercut to rock Tyson back, and Tony Tucker went on to land a few decent right hands as well in what was a nicely competitive opening round. In the second round, referee Mosley did have to break some clinches that were initiated by Tucker, but there were some good exchanges in the round. Tucker was trying to catch Tyson as Tyson came in, and was landing at times, and there were some big body shots from Tyson in the round. The third round was another decent round with big shots swung by both men, which the crowd liked. Both men landed well at times, but again just to note this was in between a bunch of clinches, and the crowd started to boo Tucker's clinching towards the end of the round. Round 4 was eventful again. Tucker was trying to catch Tyson with the uppercut to some good success. We saw both men were warned about a low blow in the round, but decent shots were exchanged all round. There were some decent exchanges here and there in the 5th round as well, and the 5th might have been the clearest Mike Tyson round to this point.
The cheer you just heard, ladies and gentlemen, is a Las Vegas cheer. The over-under in this fight was the 5th round, which means that if you bet this fight to go past the 5th round and it was an even bet, you have won the bet. You would have heard a cheer either way.
There were not really any exchanges in the 6th round, however, as Tony Tucker was essentially running away in this round, but Tyson won that round with some good single shots. In the 7th round, Tucker was using his length to try and keep the pursuing Tyson at bay. Tucker was trying to showboat towards the end of the round but didn't get much success out of it. In round 8, Tucker looked lethargic at this point and was just retreating. This made the fight less competitive, hence less fun to watch, and the fight was clearly going in Tyson's favour scoring wise now. Tucker would throw a big shot here and there which was evaded by Tyson, and of course Mike Tyson evading punches can be entertaining to watch. Round 9 was similar to the last two. Unfortunately, Tucker kinda seemed to just be trying to survive at this point and was definitely tired. The likelihood of Tyson knocking out this tricky 6'5" opponent also seemed to be fading due to the fight this had become, so not too dissimilar to the previous fights I've looked at. In round 10, the story continues of the fight becoming less fun to watch as it's gone along, but in the second half of the round, Tyson started to get the crowd's attention with some of those famous power jabs, and being that Tucker was the taller man, he did open up to try and trade jabs with him, which was fun to see. Not too much to talk about for round 11 now, as Tyson was actually doing less himself at this point, and Tucker was trying to showboat again, but it didn't come before or after any significant punch or exchange, so it doesn't matter really. Randomly showboating while way out of range doesn't add to the value of the fight. Round 12 started as another round without much action like most of the rounds in the second half of the fight, but it did pick up nicely towards the end of this final round. After 12 rounds, we saw varying scorecards, with one judge having it 119-111 for Tyson, the other having it 118-113 for Tyson, and the other judge having it 116-112 for Tyson. So the first two judges both had multiple even rounds. So yeah, the last 3 fights I looked at were awfully close in terms of entertainment value, all quite similar fights, and this fight against Tucker solidified the theme of the opponent trying hard earlier in the fight, but trying to survive as it got on. And all 3 fights had its fair share of clinching, but not as badly as the first fight I looked at, of course, the least entertaining one against James Smith. So why have I got Tyson vs Tucker ranked above Tyson vs Tillis and Tyson vs Green? Well, it's hard to justify again given the similarities of these 3 fights from an entertainment standpoint, and the fact that the whole second half of this fight was relatively uneventful for the most part, and there very well may be a context bias given that this fight had a bigger fight feel as it was an undisputed title fight. So any given instance in the fight will cause more excitement than in a non-title fight, of course. But remember, Tyson vs Bonecrusher Smith was unification, and that didn't capture the same excitement element, so the fight will have to be somewhat decent to draw crowd reactions no matter what's at stake. Tyson vs Tucker is also easier to play out as a better fight than the Tillis fight and the Green fight respectively, as it went the 12 round distance as opposed to 10, so there's more time for better moments to happen. But ultimately, the differentiating factor for me is that Tyson vs Tucker had 5 straight rounds of solid action, which can't be said about the Tillis and the Green fights, in my opinion. And obviously the same can't be said about rounds 6 through 12 in this very fight I'm ranking at number 2, but there were still enough moments in the latter stages of the fight for it to not be considered completely dead. And remember, those 2 fights also dried out towards the end, the way I saw it. But you can make a case that Tucker was more competitive than both Tillis and Green were in the latter rounds against Tyson. But even if there's nothing in it in terms of how competitive or eventful the later stages of these 3 fights were, again, the fact that this Tyson vs Tucker fight had the longest streak of consistent action during the bout out of the 4 fights I've looked at so far, that's enough for me to have it as number 2 on this list. But this is very subjective, of course, so let me know in the comments if you disagree with my ordering of these 3 fights, if you have indeed seen the fights in full. Okay, now we're finally at number 1 on this list, the fight that I consider to be the most exciting Mike Tyson fight that went the distance. I keep reiterating that this is all in my opinion, but I like to think that we can all agree that this one I'm about to discuss is the best by far. I'm pretty sure it's fair to say that Mike Tyson vs Bonecrusher Smith is unanimously the worst one. Then you have the 3 in the middle which you can pretty much switch around, but this one is clear in terms of entertainment value, and the fight in question is Mighty Mike Tyson versus Donovan Razor Ruddock 2, which took place on June 28, 1991 in the Mirage in Paradise, Nevada. The now 24-year-old Mike Tyson was 40-1 at this point and on a 3-fight knockout streak since his loss to Buster Douglas, and was having an immediate rematch with Ruddock after a controversial stoppage win over him just 3 months prior. The 2 men were the 2 top contenders at heavyweight going into that first fight, so the winner ought to have got a title shot at the undisputed champion Evander Holyfield. But of course, Tyson's proverbial early stoppage win universally justified an immediate rematch between the 2. Ruddock of course wanted another chance at Tyson after he was deprived of the chance to come back and win when he felt able to continue, and Tyson was not satisfied with the victory and he wanted to right the wrong.
First of all, I've been in fights where I've been on the ground. I got hit by Mike Weaver where my leg been wobbling and I came back and I won the fight. So therefore you can't judge it by that stoppage right there, because I wasn't on the ground. But prior to that I was on the ground and I got back up and I fight even harder. So you'd have to judge it if I was on the ground and I was out.
Last time Mike Tyson said it doesn't count unless he's dead.
Well, he's still alive, so we gotta do it again.
Alright, let's get straight into the action for this big storied heavyweight rematch. Trigger warning first though, this will be a long-winded play-by-play rundown in which I glaze how great of a fight this was in Gareth A. Davis-esque fashion. Alright, so the first round is just what you want from a first round. Started off nice and tense, which was fitting given the 2 had gone to war before. Both men were letting off big single shots which got big crowd reactions, and there was some huge swings from the hip by Ruddock that Tyson just ducked under. But at the end of the round, Tyson rocked Ruddock badly. Wow, he's hurt him already. And then the 2 rivals continued on after the bell. There was an explosive start in the second round from both men to pick up where they left off, and the 2 men locked horns to engage in tight-knit exchanges, but Mike Tyson was warned for a low blow as they fought in close. After the break from the referee's warning, Mike Tyson came straight back in leading with an overhand right to put Ruddock to the canvas. Wait, how could this be a Mike Tyson fight that went the distance? Ruddock had already been rocked badly in the first round, and now knocked down in the second. After the knockdown, Tyson was of course pursuing Ruddock with explosive combinations. Tyson was warned for low punches again in close just to note, and the 2 men would lock horns again later in the round, with some huge swings attempted from Ruddock in bursts. Both men started fast again in the third round. Razor Ruddock started tagging Tyson with some big punches to the head which caused a lot of excitement, but it appears as if Ruddock couldn't keep up the onslaught as he slowed down a bit after this big moment. But the 2 men met in close again, trading some good body shots, and Tyson ended the round as the more active puncher. So the fourth round of the fight started with a nice big exchange. Tyson showed he could counter an infamous Razor Ruddock big swing with a straight punch in the form of a power jab early in the round, and shortly after, Tyson countered one of those big swings from Ruddock with a straight right hand to put Ruddock on his arse for the second knockdown of the fight, Needless to say, Ruddock made the count and Tyson stuck on Ruddock right after the knockdown. Not long after in the round, Tyson sent Ruddock's gum shield flying out of his mouth with a nice big left hook, which is always a fun moment in the fight. Tyson was coming forward with nice tight hooks and uppercuts, but Ruddock was happy to trade in close. Both men still seem happy to trade in a sort of tie clinch, if I'm not chatting complete bollocks. I believe that's what this is called. And the referee Mills Lane remained lenient as the big heavyweights got to working close. Ruddock was doing well to withstand punishment at this point and remained very competitive after being knocked down twice, still throwing big single shots. There was a punch landed after the bell from Mike Tyson just as the fourth ended, which resulted in him being deducted a point.
For his part, is not finished. They continue to go at it after the bell.
Hey! 1 point up! 1 point up!
And Mills Lane has deducted a point from Mike Tyson for hitting after the bell.
Alright, for the first time in the fight, I'm going to say the first half of the fifth round was fairly uneventful compared to the prior action. But things picked up from both men as the round went on, and the way I saw it, Mike Tyson's body shots seemed to be the differentiating factor at this point. So round 6 was another good one. There were some big exchanges in the middle of the round, but just as it seemed that Ruddock was tagging Tyson clean, Tyson would make up for it with an explosive combination in return, and Tyson's body shots were making the difference as the round went on again. But Ruddock did actually get through his infamous smash left hook to stop Tyson in his tracks late in the round. Tyson's gum shield was knocked out by this massive shot, and again I am indeed a mark for that. So halfway through the fight, this has been a great crowd pleaser. Round 7 now, we saw one of the better Ruddock starts of the round, but he was warned for a shot to the back of the head. So a bit of a dirty fight this, innit? Because you've got a fair bit of hitting and holding from both men, and you've got the borderline shots from Tyson going on here too. Halfway through the round, Ruddock appeared to have made connections with a big smash left hook again which got the crowd hyped, but all the swings he followed up with were evaded by Tyson. Later in the round, Ruddock landed another smash left hook, more clean this time, and the crowd would all cheer for Ruddock here, but again, this incurred a frenzied attack from Tyson so he would come off looking better. The crowd went crazy for this last exchange in the round. Round 8 was a little bit slower as Ruddock looked quite tired. Tyson was walking Ruddock straight down here, looking less mobile than usual himself but commanding the ring. Ruddock picked it up at the end of the round, again to a response from Tyson, just to make sure we didn't have to endure one whole round without a crowd pleasing exchange. And guess what? The late exchange continued on after the bell, which resulted in Razor Ruddock being deducted a point. So 3 points off from Ruddock now, with the 2 knockdowns and the 1 point deduction.
Point off here!
I think Mills Lane just took a point off of Ruddock.
Yeah, he was a point. Hey, Delby! Point off for Ruddock.
Yes.
Okay, round 9 we've got the two men trading in close again, and Tyson was going low again, which he was warned for a bunch of times earlier in the fight. So Tyson was now deducted a point for the second time in the fight. Remember, the first one was for a shot after the bell, and obviously this one was for a low blow. Shortly after the deduction, Ruddock landed that big 45-degree hook on Tyson, and later in the round, he landed another, and need I say, Tyson returned by throwing some heat. But it appeared here that Ruddock's smash punches were more telling than Tyson's responses in this particular round. The 10th round was looking like a Tyson round as he was beating up Ruddock to the head and body, but Tyson was deducted for a low blow again. That's 3 point deductions. Shows how much of a dirty fight this was. Mills Lane was always finding himself in a tough spot in these heavyweight fights, weren't he? A lot of the time we see a disqualification after 3 point deductions, but Lane let this great fight continue. Also in this round, Ruddock did appear to rock Mike Tyson, which had the crowd going crazy again, and solidified how competitive this fight still was, or arguably more competitive than it was in the earlier rounds. In round 11, Tyson's shots were really swelling up the face of Razor Ruddock. Ruddock ended up with a broken jaw as a result of this fight, so it's fair to say it was already broken at this point. Next up, we have a funny moment where Mills Lane broke the action to warn Tyson for a low blow again, and as soon as the action resumed, Ruddock led with a big low blow straight back. Mills Lane got mad here, and I don't blame him.
You knock that shit off, alright? Both of you, come on, let's go!
Golden moment that. After this incident, Tyson was still going fairly low with his punches to loud groans from the Nevada crowd. And finally, round 12 was a great back and forth round to top off a great fight. No crazy moments in the last round to comment on, but there was consistently good action throughout the round, and the two men nearly fought after the bell again to top it all off. And before the two men would ultimately embrace, Mills Lane had to say to Tyson, "It's over, Mike," fearing Mike Tyson might continue on after the fight in another funny moment. So yeah, that was just an insane war in there, man. A proper 12-round heavyweight battle of attrition. After 12, the official scorecards read 113-109, 114-108, and again 114-108, all in favour of mighty Mike Tyson. Crazy scorecard with all the deductions and knockdowns, and commentator Freddie Pacheco kept going on about all the mathematics that will have to be done to tally up the scores as the rounds went on and more points were taken off. So yeah, this was the 12-round back and forth Mike Tyson war, a true gem of a fight, in what ended up being his last fight in the first part of his career. as it was of course his last fight before going to jail. So who knows, maybe if he never got convicted of rape, he would have gone on to be a guy who had a bunch of 12-round wars in a complete career switch up. But this fight that is number 1 on the list of Mike Tyson fights that went the distance in terms of entertainment value is also his last pro fight that went the distance chronologically, as he never went the distance in his decade-long post-prison sentence career. Although he did partake in another long-winded battle of attrition in his 11th round TKO loss to Evander Holyfield in 1996, which actually got Ring Magazine Fight of the Year. So that fight actually went on longer than 2 of the fights on this list. Tyson's 2 10-rounders against both James Tillis and Mitch Green, but obviously we're looking at fights that saw the final bell here. Alright, so I shouldn't really need to justify putting Tyson vs Ruddock 2 above the other 4 fights, but the fact is that definitely puts it above the other 3 in the middle is the fact that that action lasted throughout, and bar the knockdowns, you could say it picked up as it went along. Now if you could choose to watch a fight that had a fun first half and a fairly boring second half, or with a fairly boring first half but a fun second half, you would choose the latter. But Tyson vs Ruddock was just good all round, first half and second half. Now guys, do let me know if you disagree with my rankings in the comments. I predict the most controversial choice of mine is having the James Tillis fight as the second worst. Some might think that's the second best one by far, but I think there's a context bias with the fact that Tillis was the first to take Tyson the distance, and some people actually thought Tillis ought to have got the nod on the cards in that fight. But watching the fight in full, even if the later rounds were still competitive, when you actually watch it in full, there were long periods where not much of note happened. Speaking of watching the fights in full, look, people can say whatever they want in my comment sections, but it'd be preferable if you've seen these fights in full if you want to justify one fight on this list being more entertaining than the other, because highlights can of course make certain fights look way better than they are, but ultimately the focus here is entertainment, which is a highly subjective thing to rank fights on. I'm not talking about how fair the fights were, how well the opponents did, or how Tyson himself performed. I was just concerned with which was the most fun to watch. But again, if you discuss other things like the judging or the refereeing or the tactical elements of the fights in the comments, then of course go ahead. Before I go, I have to add that Tyson of course went the distance with Roy Jones in an exhibition fight, but we're only counting professional fights here. But yeah, just let me know what you think in the comments, especially in regards to what you think was most entertaining out of the James Tillis fight, the Mitch Green fight and the Tony Tucker fight. Alright, so I wanted to just end the video there, but this is my quick raw take on Mike Tyson vs Jake Paul, which just happened as I speak. As I'm narrating now, that fight literally just happened live. Easy to say now, but I plan to post this video before that fight, and I was going to make a quick mention to the fact that I reckon Tyson vs Paul does go the distance, but yeah, it's just happened now. I had other affairs to attend to that held back this video, and now by the time I edit this whole joint and post it, the Tyson vs Paul fight will probably already be old news because that fight was so dead. But yeah, that fight was just a baby ting, man. Baby ting. I'm making mention of it because it was a Tyson fight that went the distance, but it was an exhibition, so it doesn't qualify as an entry on this list. But I guess the question I'll leave you guys with before I go is, what was more boring? Mike Tyson vs Bonecrusher Smith or Mike Tyson vs Jake Paul? Let me know in the comments down below, and you've been listening to O.M.E. Boxing.